I thought we'd go for the fireside chat.
The fireside chat. Are you sitting comfortably?
I am indeed.
Excellent,
Thank you,
excellent. Thank you for your presentation, Minister. And you won't be disappointed to know that the questions have come flooding in already, even before we've mentioned the Slido link. Just to recap on that, for those who don't know, the QR code is on your table, and also I think Lily and Katrina will be going round with the mics, so we'll take some questions now for the next 25, 30 minutes or so. Let me begin by asking you, there are a lot of bold proposals and initiatives in the economic strategy. I suppose the obvious first question is, can we afford it?
We can't not afford it, to be honest with you. I mean, the slide shows just an overview. Right at the start of this administration, we launched the economic strategy. That work had been going on before COVID in the last administration, getting KPMG in, doing, for the first time really, a complete overview of where we are, where we've been and where we need to get to. And a lot of the parts of the economic strategy were looking at a small island economy with a high level of public service and an aging population, an economy which wasn't, everyone admitted, wasn't managing to retain and attract young people to it, and was heavily reliant on various sectors, particularly financial services, e-gaming. Now that has changed, and we've seen changes in the e-gaming environment. We've seen significant increases in the insurance sector. And so what's come from the economic strategy is the realization, one, that we have a very diverse economy, going from manufacturing to world-class service businesses, but also that we need to nurture that and provide the right environment for that to expand further, and look at new sectors that can come on. So the whole essence of the economic strategy was government to realise what we have, what we could have, to protect what we have and allow it to expand, but also to attract new businesses here, but also to leverage private investment and work with industry in the right way. So a lot of the strategies, a lot of the groups that you've seen coming out from the economic strategy are really working with the businesses here and across to make sure that we can develop our economy and keep it providing the services for our community.
And you said we cannot not afford it. Government borrowing has increased by, I think it's in the region of £400 to £500 million since the last election. So is that sustainable?
Well, government borrowing.
That's the question that's come in. Government borrowing's increased.
Government borrowing hasn't increased to 400 million. Sorry? Oh, okay. Government is quite clear with our audited accounts how much we borrow. Now, in terms of central borrowing, we have the bond issue that was taken out, a sustainable bond, which has been allocated to a whole range of initiatives, going from the steam packet through to education, through to dealing with sewage problems. Government is very careful about borrowing. We do have significant borrowing from local authorities, often in terms of local housing or improving the services that they provide to their communities. But in terms of government borrowing, we are very strict in terms of that. What we do, though, is draw down on reserves. And again, we've been very clear about that, needing to draw down on reserves. If you go on the economic dashboard, you can see the level of government reserves, which are currently £1.83 billion. But a large part of that is in our National Insurance Fund, which is ring-fenced for the payment of benefits, particularly pensions. Over 80% of that goes in pensions. And so in terms of government borrowing, no, we are not getting into debt with the world market. What we are trying to do is make sure we can deal with the revenue we spend, but do that without constantly having to draw down on the revenue that's been deposited by previous administrations.
I suspect that is what the questioner means in the way they phrase the question. But let me, I suppose, move on slightly. For how much longer is it sustainable to be dipping into the reserves for a rainy day at the current levels?
Well, we've published in February a medium-term financial plan to return to a positive balance over the next 4 to 5 years, to bring down from reserves, particularly to invest in the capital programme, which is coming out of revenue spending, to make sure that we can maintain the schools, we can maintain our hospitals, we can maintain our roads and infrastructure going forward, but to grow the economy to a level whereby we no longer need to draw down from reserves. But that will need that fiscal discipline, that fiscal prudence that I've outlined in the slide, and that will be reinforced during the course of today, Because yesterday we were talking about connectivity, today we're talking about security, both in terms of security for people, but also for our economy going forward, because both are key to making sure that we have a safe and secure and vibrant community.
Going to take a few questions, thank you. Going to take a few questions from Slido, and then we'll open it up to the floor. And if you have got a question, please raise your hand, and we will. Well, that's a lot of hands, so we'll try and get to you quickly. If Katrina and Lily are willing to sort of start making their way around the room, if you can keep your hand up, certainly a couple of you, thank you. But first of all. Quick question. Jersey government's announced it's capping top civil servant salaries. Is the Isle of Man government going to do the same?
Jersey have come out with quite a few announcements on the back of their draft budget that they published. They too are looking at putting money into the healthcare system, putting money into their economy. One of the things that they're wrestling with, as the same as we are, is in terms of government headcount. Now, as you are aware, there are ongoing negotiations with the PSC in terms of civil servants' pay, and so I don't want to intervene in those discussions between the PSC and the unions. But I think certainly one of the things we're looking at is the overall headcount. There's both the number of staff we need and the grade of staff we need in the Isle of Man government to provide the services we need. And we'll be talking about that later on this morning. I think coming out with figures of percentages or the numbers of people you're going to reduce sometimes are unhelpful, because also we're trying to improve the culture of the Isle of Man government on the back of quite a damaging industrial tribunal, and make sure those people who are in the Isle of Man government who do fantastic work are actually valued and recognised for the work that they do.
Might be unhelpful, of course, but I mean, in terms of facing the sort of the bare facts, the figures have to be addressed. Following on from the unexpected costs of COVID, this leads us nicely onto this question and subsequent high inflation. At which point do you think the government will be able to start to build its reserves back up? That leads us in nicely.
Yeah, again, there's two elements to that, I suppose. One is the actual money coming into the reserves. And as I said, in the medium-term financial plan, we aim to start putting money back into reserves within 4 or 5 years. The other aspect to it is how those reserves are invested and how we get the maximum benefit from the interest that comes in, that brings in. And so we've been reviewing the way that reserves are invested. We've been looking at alternative ways of doing that to increase the returns to those reserves. In the same way as a household, you look around for the best interest rate, we've been looking at the best way of securing those reserves for the people of the Isle of Man. And we will be announcing, hopefully fairly shortly, that the way that that's changed and our aspirations for the future.
One more question from Slido for the moment, with economic commentary in the UK calling for significant public infrastructure investment to drive economic growth. The question is simple: are you revisiting the island's infrastructure spend?
Yes, so and it is a balancing act, because the UK have the ability to borrow large amounts of money for large infrastructure investments. We've been using our reserves to do that and our capital revenue to do that, and we've had some significant investment both in terms of schools, in terms of healthcare facilities on this island, but also some of the roads. I won't mention the prom scheme, but we've made significant advances there in terms of the facilities we have here. There's also the whole aspect of the Liverpool landing stage, and bringing that on stream to get the maximum economic benefit for that in terms of the visitor economy, but also providing very, very good travel links. But that's not been without difficulties. In some ways, Liverpool, for us, is almost like our HS2, a very ambitious project that scopes, in our case, a different country, but has run into a whole series of problems, particularly over COVID, that have led to significant overspends that then have to be dealt with and rationalised over a long-term plan to capitalise on that investment.
I'm sure we could have a session on that issue alone. Okay, let us open up to the floor. If I can respectfully ask the question as we get to restrict their question to one, just so we can get it around as many people as possible out of courtesy, really. Yes, the lady at the back there, first of all, thank you. If I can ask you to stand up as well, just so we can hear you loud and clearly. Thank you.
Hi, Jackie Bettridge. Thank you for that, Minister. I'm still intrigued, and it's a question that I'm always asking, and I've indeed asked the Minister before. So we have, what we can see is how much money we're spending, where it's being spent, and you've had PwC come in and do that piece of work. My major concern is who's got the overview of whether that money is being spent correctly, who's got the overview of how that has a knock-on effect that might take other things out, and who's got the overview of where we are with Manx Care. I just don't get it. I don't get where the overview is, because you can do fiscally where we are, each department can tell us where we are, but the actual overview of the Isle of Man, where we are, where we're going, how we're going to get out of this, I haven't heard.
Okay. So there are two issues there. The first one is right at the start of this administration, Alf Cannon brought out the ideas of an island plan. So yes, we are doing departmental plans. Each department is saying how much they spend, what their outcomes are doing, but tying that all together under the central themes of where this country is going to is what the island plan's all about. The economic strategy was locked into that island plan. So if you want to see where we want to go, what we're doing now and where we want to be at the end of this administration and beyond that, that is in the island plan, which is revisited. And earlier on this year, we had a reset of that, looking particularly at some of the key issues that we're talking about over yesterday and today, which are things like security, connectivity, looking at budgets right across government and government efficiency. In terms of looking at health and social care and the cost and the way that that's funded, again, that comes down to the Department of Health and Social Care, the mandate they give to Manx Care, but also looking at the outcomes that come from that. So the activity statistics, the waiting times, all that information which is now being provided far better in real time by Manx Care to show what they've been doing with the money. But there are some significant issues that have been identified by the board, and the job of government to work with the board through the Department of Health and Social Care to try to redress and reset some of the issues that they're having in terms of the budgetary overspend.
But Minister, that is not...
I think you probably want a follow-up to that one. I think that's allowed.
That's not the overview. The overview is who sits within government and goes, is that actually how the money should be spent? I get that there's departments, but because departments work in silos, they don't work together. So for me, sorry everybody, I work for the third sector, but I run two organisations. I'm struggling to understand when I sit on all sorts of steering groups across government. I don't understand how I can go into one meeting where I'm being told something and go into another meeting where I'm being told the polar opposite. Someone within government has to have the overview.
Yeah. So again, the overview is through looking at the island plan, those key priorities, many of which, particularly that affect the third sector, cross through different departments. I completely agree with you on that. And then the council of ministers having that coherent approach to driving those policies forward. So I'm sorry that you've been going to different groups and having different conflicting answers. The overview of where we're going to, though, is steered by the council of ministers, trying to bring all those departments together. And increasingly, when we're looking at government spending, making sure that it's not just one department spending for its own priorities, but those priorities are linked with other areas. So particularly, for instance, in terms of mental health, that affects just about every single department and local authorities right across our island and the third sector. So how can we make sure that spending to address public health, mental health problems, both right from the prevention through to the treatment phases, is spread right across those areas and gets the feedback from police officers, teachers, and healthcare workers as well. And that's where the island plan comes in. That's where the constant monitoring of that comes in from the council of ministers.
Thank you, Jackie, for your question. Just let me ask you, and we'll come to you now, sir. Just let me ask you, and I appreciate it's several administrations. This is nothing new, but how big a problem still is silo?
I think it's now far less of a problem than it used to be because of the close working relationship between various ministers, because we've tried to redress the board structure so that we're linking key themes such as health and social policy rather than abstract ideas. It's still an issue when you've got confined budgets and when our various departments are being asked to rationalise their spend and try to prove the outcomes from it, because some of the outcomes of what they're spending money on, they may not see as a department. So preventing crime, for instance, the constabulary will never see that return, but we know the return to the wider economy. Helping prevent mental health problems in a school environment, the school won't know about that. They'll just have more kids in the classroom rather than at home crying. But we know the knock-on effects that might have to health and social care and to the benefits system if those people can't get work. So I think the silo mentality, I think that's a criticism from any structure and form of government, whether that be local government or central government. I think the fact that we've got a cohesive council of ministers, we've got an island plan and are all committed to it, should cut down those boundaries. But there are still some sometimes difficult discussions to be had to make sure that the actions of one department don't have knock-on effects to another.
Thank you. Sir, you have the floor.
You keep on going, okay. Good morning, Alex. Very interesting to hear that you're going to take on the culture of the government. But that's 2.3 million for the changing culture necessary and efficiency in government, when the bucket is already leaking and you're pouring more money into it. The general public are seeing the only growth industry in the Isle of Man as being government workers, civil servants, and layers and layers and layers of management. And here's yet another, could it be called a quango, being put together, 1.8 million, 1.5. Okay, that's that point. The other one is...
I'm sorry to interrupt, sir. I'm just aware that we're tight for time. Could we go straight to the question, if possible?
Yeah, straight to the question. Return on investment. 15 million deficit coming in the budget, yet 330 million spent on sea service. The Manxman, the Liverpool landing stage, the addition to the pier in Douglas, the purchase of the steam packet company comes to around 330 million. Where's the return on investment on that? And is the Manxman fit for purpose? As was said yesterday, prangs are normal. Prangs cause delays, and that culture is not acceptable.
Okay, so obviously there's a couple of points there. Is the Manxman fit for purpose? Yes. If you buy a new car, are you waiting for the first time you get it dented in ShopRite car park, now known as Tesco's? Yes. Is that investment in terms of our connectivity worthwhile? Yes. The reason the steam packet company was bought by the previous administration was clearly stated, that we were currently at the time being held to ransom by a Portuguese bank and a couple of hedge funds. It was absolutely right that we got back control of the key lifeline for the Isle of Man. Investment in new vessels is essential, and we heard from Brian Thompson the next stage, which will be a replacement for the Manannan, and that costs money. But the return from investment you'll find when you look at the company accounts, the Isle of Man Steam Packet Company, the return of the investment in terms of Liverpool, you'll find when we start growing the visitor economy, given the fact that the existing terminal that we were using in Liverpool for many years was no longer available because of the cruise facilities there. We couldn't use that, we needed somewhere else, and the Isle of Man public didn't fancy Birkenhead.
Thank you. We are going to move on, but I'm sure there's a few follow-ups we could have there. I'm very well aware of that. Yes, David Quirk.
Thanks, James. Can I ask the Treasury Minister regarding the arm's length companies that we now have? Do you still have confidence, like the population out there is worried about these arm's length companies not being accountable?
Yeah, so thank you for that, because I think, again, that was one of the issues that came up yesterday. The Isle of Man Steam Packet Company, when it was bought, was not nationalised. And we haven't really nationalised anything apart from probably the horse trams. when you look at a private company that is making a large return, but for a hedge fund and an overseas bank, taking that back into public control, looking at how it's running and looking at making absolutely certain it's running the best interest of the Isle of Man economy, but still providing a profit, I think is the right thing to do, rather than nationalise it and end up having a government subsidy to provide those services. So I think it's right that we have arm's length companies. I think that's an efficient and effective way of doing it, and certainly better than the track record we've seen with nationalisation with the adjacent Isle. But what we always need to do is reset those arm's length companies to make sure that the board understand and quite clearly set out to them their priorities in terms of catering for the Isle of Man public, providing community services, providing a decent return, but also at the same time making sure that that's in the best interests of the Isle of Man economy. And that's what's happening with the steam packet at the moment. But we've also got, obviously, the Manx Care Board, we've got Manx Utilities Board, we've got a whole range of different bodies that have actually set up to bring in the best private sector initiative, expertise to provide public sector services. And I think that model constantly needs evaluating and tweaking, but is the best model going forward. What you're talking about is the flow of information for that, and certainly I think the steam packet will be the first people to say that they need to get better information going on to the Manx public. And by putting in the new 2 non-executive directors, that's one of the main reasons they've been brought in, is in terms of marketing, information, and being able to answer questions as well as deal with concerns.
Thank you. Again, we could have 1 or 2 follow-ups. We're just going to be beaten by the clock here. So, gentleman at the front.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Peter Sherwood. I had a question about research funding, scientific research funding, which could be for universities or for industry. And 3 possible sources, just to ask what the situation is regarding this. Are we able to access United Kingdom research funding from the Science and Engineering Research Council or any other medical research council, or whatever the research body would be? That would be the first question.
To my knowledge, no. A lot of the research funding that both was previously in the EU with Erasmus and also in the UK is ring-fenced for those jurisdictions. What we've tried to do is do joint ventures with some of the UK universities going forward, and we've been successful with that on certain projects.
And the second source would be, as the United Kingdom is responsible for our defence and foreign policy, can we access NATO funding? As you know, there are NATO grants that support scientific research between at least 2 investigators in different NATO countries. Do we qualify as a NATO country?
We don't. There you're going into constitutional issues in terms of our relationship. We are a Crown dependency. We rely upon the UK in terms of our defence. You're absolutely right. We have close relations with the United Kingdom Ministry of Defence, but we are not an independent member of NATO. What we do is work quite closely with the MOD in terms of our protection, but also what we can offer to them in terms of their ability to, for instance, recruit over here, and the close liaisons we have in terms of our own security, but also making sure that we are part of larger security efforts with the UK. In terms of funding of research, UCM have been doing quite a lot, as I said, in terms of having joint partnerships with universities in the UK, by sharing expertise, by looking at research there, but also by having some of the research facilities on island as well for postgraduate work.
Thank you, sir. I think I am going to have to...
One last source, can I just
you go on,
mention very quickly. Are you open to co-funding with other agencies in other countries? For example, the National Science Foundation in the United States has international programs. They pay part of the funding, the other country pays part.
We're certainly open to any of the offers in terms of collaborative working. I mean, there are a range of different areas where that already is going on and happening. But any future opportunities, we're more than happy to look into them. Yeah.
Thank you very much indeed. I'm going to ask if we can answer a few more from Slido quite succinctly. Chrissy has asked, she says we spend less per capita than any of the other jurisdictions in the British Isles on education and claims the system is failing our children. Is the amount spent going to change? Well, obviously the amount spent's going to change, but I don't think that's what she's driving at.
No, it's a very interesting aspect with the recent independent report looking at education. They were comparing the per child spend between us, the United Kingdom and the Channel Islands, and we came in quite low. I think one of the issues, and we've been talking about silo mentality, one of the issues is shared services. And so when you look at the spend in terms of education, that actually doesn't reflect some of the extra costs that we put in. I think you could always put more funding into education, absolutely. What the department are doing at the moment is trying to rationalise that spend and concentrate particularly on those children who have special educational needs and make sure that they have the best services available to them. But it is an issue to deal with that at the same time as you have, as I said at the moment, a slightly fluctuating school population, and we're actually seeing it starting to increase again after a period of stagnation. So can we spend more money on education? Absolutely. But one of the things I've been trying to do this morning is show sometimes the conflicting priorities and the way we need to address them as a whole.
Is Manx Care overspending or underfunded?
So I'm a Treasury Minister, so anyone who goes into the red is overspending. However, we do need to make sure that we analyse their initial funding and speak to them and understand why they've got an overspend. And that's what's been happening this financial year in terms of the scrutiny panels, in terms of drilling down as to whether there's an inherent issue with the funding model or there's a problem with the expenditure.
Just to interject, has the investment level required or highlighted in the Jonathan Michael report been met?
From my point of view, yes, it has been met to the extent that it's affordable for the Isle of Man. West Streeting made a very good comment that if the UK doesn't do something significantly to reform their health service, they will have an NHS with an economy attached to it. We are in the same situation on the Isle of Man, that with the growing expense and growing amount of money that's been put into the health services, it will distract from some of the work we're also trying to do on the economy, education, infrastructure, enterprise. We must make sure that we have a health service which can provide the essential key services for people on this island, but is also affordable for the people on this island.
Treasury Minister Alex Allinson, thank you very much indeed. I have got about 12 questions on Slido which haven't been asked, and I appreciate there's still a couple of hands up that we're not going to get to.
Well, if you can share those with us, then I'll take them back to Treasury. If we can, obviously, some of these are anonymous, and I completely respect that, but we can figure out with the organisers a way of publishing the answers to those.
Super. And of course, the Minister is going to be here all day.
I need to go off now for a Treasury Board meeting, but I'll be back later on this morning.
It's a poor excuse, sir.
Well, again, it is, and I apologise. One of the aspects of that, there's been various people calling for Parliament to be recalled, and the fact that we have this long summer holiday. One of the reasons that Parliament goes into recess is so that the civil servants, the people behind the scenes, can actually get on with the day job. And that's what I'll be doing this morning in terms of, we have right the way through the summer been having weekly Treasury meetings. We've been having weekly updates in terms of the economy. We unfortunately don't go on holiday, and when we do, we're on Teams. But so I apologise for not being here for the next hour and a half, but I will be back here at lunchtime, and certainly look forward to the further discussions about security and also the summing up by the Chief Minister at the end.
Thank you for your thought-provoking questions. Sorry, we've only got to half of them. Thank you for your time, Minister. Alex Allinson, the Treasury Minister. Thank you.